broadcast goes live. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Thank you for joining the Ottawa Police for this update to the community on the ongoing demonstration. This update will be followed by media availability. Merci d'être avec nous aujourd'hui pour la mise à jour de la police d'Ottawa. Celle-ci sera suivie d'une disponibilité aux médias. My name is Constable Amy Gagnon, and I will be your moderator. Je suis l'agente Amy Gagnon, et je serai l'animatrice de cette séance. We will begin with remarks from Ottawa Police Deputy Chief Steve Bell. Nous allons commencer par les remarques du chef adjoint Steve Bell.
Thank you very much, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. The Ottawa Police Service and its partners continue to work all out to put a safe end to the unlawful occupation of our downtown core and improve neighborhood safety. Our surge and contain strategy, which has reduced the footprint of the demonstrators, continues. As we do police operations, our police operations are focused on enforcement in our downtown core. Yesterday, an important court order was issued in relation to the demonstration. The Ottawa Police Service is authorized to enforce compliance with the terms of a court order. The Ottawa Police Service continues to have authority under Section 127 of the Criminal Code to arrest and lay a charge for breaching a court order. Ottawa police officers will exercise their discretion in enforcing this order and any criminal investigation arising from an alleged breach of this order. We're working to ensure we're enforcing the order. Work is underway to fully brief all officers on the terms of the order and their role in enforcing it. We continue to capture and document evidence. We'll have an update on this later today. As more resources become available to us, we will use them specifically to focus on the unlawful demonstrators whom have chosen to remain in our city. To date, we've made 22 arrests, issued more than 1,300 tickets, and have 79 ongoing criminal investigations. We've seized fuel and cut off material, financial, and logistical support to the occupation. I also want to be clear, we're not just dealing with demonstrators in Ottawa. Yesterday, working with Ohio Police, we were able to trace, identify, and arrest an individual for calling in fake threats designed to deceive and distract our emergency resources. Many of the remaining demonstrators are highly determined and volatile. They've begun filling gas canisters with water, distracting officers, or otherwise attempting to subvert our efforts. Yesterday, we had an attack on our hardworking officers. While attempting to seize fuel from demonstrators, multiple officers were swarmed by these same demonstrators. We've initiated a criminal investigation into this matter. We've seized and towed some vehicles and continue to face resourcing and operational challenges in doing more. Many heavy vehicles in the downtown core have been immobilized. Recent aggressiveness towards our officers is unacceptable. We've identified our need for the 1,800 officers and civilian personnel that will bring a safe end to this occupation. We do not want anyone to be injured. We know that some demonstrators have indicated a desire to leave. In some cases, they're blocked in by other vehicles, and where possible, we're working to facilitate their departure. Through intelligence, we've also learned that almost 25% of the 418 trucks encamped in our city have children living in them, children who could be at risk during a police operation. We're working with the Children's Aid Society to ensure their welfare and safety. Finally, our message to demonstrators remains the same. Don't come. And if you do, there'll be consequences, including financial consequences for your illegal and unlawful behavior. Thank you.
Before we begin, a reminder to media to put your microphone on mute until I invite you to ask your question. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais vous rappeler de désactiver votre microphone jusqu'à ce que je vous invite à poser une question. Also, we do have Emergency Services General Manager Kim Ayotte from the city, who's a subject matter expert, and he will be off camera unless questions are asked directly to him. Alors, un rappel, on a aussi des mesures d'urgence de la ville, le gérant, et puis c'est un conférencier expert. Il sera hors caméra jusqu'à ce qu'on lui pose une question directement. Okay. We will proceed by alphabetical order for the media outlets. You may ask one question each, and if we have time, we will come back to you. We have until 2:30. Alors, nous allons maintenant répondre aux questions de chaque organisme média par ordre alphabétique. Vous allez poser une question chaque. Nous avons jusqu'à 14h30 et si on a le temps, on reviendra pour une deuxième question. So we will start. Do we have anyone from 104.7? Alors, est-ce qu'on a quelqu'un de 104.7? I do not see anyone from 104.7. We will move on to CBC Ottawa. CBC Ottawa. Oh, just a minute. Jadrino Huot pour 104.7. Désolé. Vas-y, Jadrino.
Avec le 104.7, je suis avec Bell Media. My question, Mr. Bell, you told us about an attack, and Mr. Slowly talked about injuries to some of your officers as well. Can you give us an idea of how many officers were injured and the kind of injuries that they suffered?
Merci Jordan pour votre question. In terms of serious injuries to our officers, we're very fortunate to report that we haven't had any to this point. There has been, during altercations, some more minor injuries sustained by the officers, but nothing that has taken any of our members out of commission or not able to continue to provide policing services.
Merci. Thank you. And now we'll go with CBC Ottawa. I see that Kate Porter is here. So Kate will be giving you the mic shortly, and you can ask one question.
Hi
Go
there.
ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Chief Bell. When you speak of, I guess it's something like 100 trucks that have children in them, and you're saying the CAS is involved, are you requiring that they somehow are able to remove the children from the trucks? I mean, what would be the next steps for police in terms of, moving on any of those trucks if you're concerned about kids?
Thank you very much for your question, Kate. So we identify that concern for us. It's something that has come to us early in the course of this occupation. We observed through members who are moving around within the crowds that they began to saw children, families that had attended here to take part in the occupation. It's something that greatly concerns us. It's something that concerns us for the well-being of everyone within the area, from the risk of carbon monoxide and fumes, the noise levels that we know are experienced by the neighboring areas, as well as the people that are right in the occupation. We're concerned about cold. We're concerned about access to sanitation, the ability to shower. There's a multitude of concerns. That's why we're raising it and identifying it as something that is something we need to address. We need to have discussions with our partners in the Children's Aid Society about how we manage moving ahead. We're not at the stage of looking to do any sort of enforcement activity around that. We'll rely on the Children's Aid Society to help provide and give us guidance around that. We just think it's an important factor that complicates and makes this an even more challenging operation that's important that people are aware of.
Thank you, Kate. We'll now go to City News, and we have Alex Gouge. Alex, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hello. So my question is for Deputy Chief Steve Bell, and how logistically how much difficulty does the fact that people are bringing in water in these fuel tanks, how much difficulty does that put on the Ottawa Police Service in terms of enforcement?
Thanks for the question, Alex. It's a good one. What I can tell you is it does provide a layer of logistical complexity to us. If the number of gas cans going in, it creates challenges for us to actually conduct searches, to stop and conduct searches, ultimately seize those gas cans and the fuel in them, and potentially charge someone as a result of that. The other thing it does for us is identifies a level of sophistication and a level of ability of this group to try and subvert police efforts. That's concerning to us. We know we continue to have discussions with the demonstrators about the occupation. We are actively looking to find remedies and resolutions to end this. But we know that as they harden in their position and as they try and engage in activity that subvert our efforts, it's quite concerning to us.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we'll go to Ted Raymond with CTV Ottawa. Ted, you can go ahead.
Thank you. My question is also for Deputy Chief Bell. I'm asking about, you mentioned off the top that several of the vehicles that are parked downtown have been immobilized. We've heard of reports of vehicles having their tires or their wheels taken off, that sort of thing. How does that affect your abilities to start to remove these vehicles? I know the city's also had trouble getting towing companies to cooperate in terms of actually moving the vehicles that are blocking streets out of the downtown. You know, what are your next steps, and when can we see more of that action taking place given the situation?
Thanks for the question, Ted. Yeah, the immobilizing of the vehicles in the occupation area is extremely concerning to us. You're absolutely right. We've seen vehicles that have had their tires taken off. We've seen larger vehicles that we know have had their brakes bled to make them rendered immobile. We identified early on there's many layers of complexity to dismantling this occupation. One of them is the sheer size of it. It covers, as we know, many blocks within our city's downtown core. The other challenge is the size of the vehicles. When you add the complexity of active attempts to interfere with any of our ability to remove them, it just adds that extra layer of complexity. What I can tell you is it's something that we're absolutely considering. It's something we're planning around. And ultimately, at the end of this, when the occupation is over and people go home, we know that we're going to have to do some cleanup in that area, and we're making operational plans to actually achieve that.
Thank you. We will now go to Global News. Craig Lord. Craig, you can go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you. So we know we've heard a lot about the need for additional officers, 1,800 more personnel, but looking at all the options available to the police in the criminal code, powers potentially granted by the courts or declarations by the province or the federal government, does the Ottawa Police Service currently have all the legal authority that you feel you need to end this protest, or are there additional powers or authorities you're going to be seeking to acquire before this can officially be routed and ended?
My apologies. Thank you for the question, Craig. As we indicated very early on in the early days of this, everything is on the table for us to consider in terms of options. You are absolutely right. There are several legal avenues that we need to explore and continue to explore. As part of our ask in resources to come and assist us, it is not only uniformed officers to be engaged in our front-facing activities. We have within there lawyers, legal competencies that we're seeking from various different agencies, including Transport Canada, the Ministry of Transportation Ontario, experts in insurance, experts in licensing and registration of these types of vehicles, these types of large trucks. So we do know there are several avenues for us to explore. We've brought together an investigative strategy that looks at all of those different avenues, and we will use everything within our means that currently exists and explore anything else that we need to have added to our toolbox to hold the people that are engaged in this accountable.
Thank you. We'll now go to the Ottawa citizen, Matt Lapierre. Matt, you may go ahead.
Good afternoon, Deputy Chief Bell. I was just wondering if you can give us any kind of updated timeline. Do you expect the protest to continue through this weekend? Do the police have any kind of new operating timeline, any expectation?
Thank you very much for the question, Matt. So from the beginning, we have never identified timelines for this. We want this occupation to end as soon as possible. We want these demonstrators to pick up, realize that their message has been heard, and go home to where they came from so that our citizens can have their city back. We feel we deserve this, and our citizens are very loud in calling for this to end. We continue to work every day to as expeditiously and safely end the occupation so the citizens of Ottawa can have their city back.
Thank you, Matt. We now go to John Willing with the Ottawa Sun. John, it shouldn't be long and your mic should be unmuted.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Deputy, for taking our questions. How many in-house heavy tow trucks does OPS and the city have? And are those resources in play, or have they been ruled out because of any safety concerns in the red zone?
Thanks for the question, John. As with any sort of policing operation, we don't give out specific numbers around how we're going to engage in any sort of enforcement activities. So what I can tell you is we continue to work with the city and local tow truck providers to look at how we can access the number of heavy tows that we would need in the event that we have to move vehicles out of the downtown core. And we've expanded that through our city manager and our city partners to look not only at our city, but how can other cities and other municipalities help to support us in those efforts.
Thank you, John. Maintenant, on va aller avec Frédéric Pépin, Radio-Canada. Ce ne sera pas long, Frédéric, ton micro va être activé.
Oui, merci. So, Deputy Chief Bell, I'm not sure if you can answer in français. I heard you say hello, so so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you the question, Deputy Chief, and maybe Mr. Ayotte can also give me a comment on that en français. But it's really a police question, so I'm going to give it to you in English. So you mentioned a bit people walking around with jerry cans, and some are filled with water, some are not. And we saw there was a big operation on Sunday on Coventry. So what's your strategy? And I know you can't give us all the details, but what's the strategy for fuel right now? Are we going to stop everyone that we see with jerry cans, or do we want to do more organized, more bigger operations to try to get more logistical spaces where there's more fuel that is stored? Because we're seeing a lot of jerry cans walking around. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Frederic. We don't have a strategy around that. We have multi-prongs to our enforcement strategy that we're employing. We put out a statement yesterday that indicated that if you carry a jerry can into the downtown core, into the footprint of the demonstration, you would be subject to being stopped, searched, and potentially charged in relation to aiding and abetting the demonstration moving ahead. While we were doing that and while we were engaged in those enforcement activities, we were also out at Coventry Road looking at how we could take off the larger stockpile of fuel that we knew existed. There is no single strategy to this. We will do everything in our power to disrupt and deter these people from remaining in our city so that the demonstrators pick up and leave. That includes multiple different prongs of enforcement that we are engaged in now and will increase over the days.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mackenzie Gray with CTV National.
So sorry, Amy, I think that Frédéric wanted Kim
En
Ayotte.
français.
He didn't like my hello, so.
Désolé. Excuse-moi, Frédéric.
C'est bien correct. Frédéric, oui. D'abord, les contenants de gasoline et d'autres pétrole, la stratégie pour les polices, ils en ont plusieurs. Il y a plusieurs différentes stratégies, mais il veut que les manifestants savent que s'ils rentrent avec du pétrole dans un contenant, ils vont se faire arrêter, ils vont faire une recherche de la personne, ils vont chercher la personne et la gasoline. Et si la personne est en train de rentrer la gasoline, ils vont se faire arrested. Excuse.
OK. Est-ce que ça va, Frédéric? Ou est-ce que tu as besoin d'un peu plus?
Oh non, c'est parfait. Merci, Monsieur Ayotte. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. So that now covers our local media. If we have time, we will come back and we will now start with our national media. So we're going to go to CTV National, Mackenzie Gray. Go ahead, Mackenzie.
Hi there. Thanks for taking questions today. Questions for Deputy Chief Bell. Yesterday, when we were at a press conference with the police chief, he was talking about how there was going to be strict enforcement of the no fuel moving into the downtown core. Literally at the same time, he was telling me that at the press conference, our crews were out downtown, saw wheelbarrows full of jerry cans going right by police officers. And when we asked the police officers why they didn't stop them, they said that, well, there might be water in there, so they're free to move into the area. Why should anyone in the city believe that the police are actually going to be able to enforce this when we have concrete examples of large amounts of fuel and jerry cans moving into the downtown core and the police standing by and doing nothing?
Thank you for your question, Mackenzie. And it's a really good question. Yesterday, you saw us lay out the request for augmented resources to come into the city to help us manage the situation around the demonstration, around the occupation and the demonstrators that were in that area. One of the things we identified in early days is it was going to be really important for us to cut off the flow of fuel into that area. As you've just indicated through the pictures that you've taken, there are many different ways, different places that flow is coming in through. We believe that the 1,800 officers and civilian members that we've requested will help us harden up the perimeter of that will lead us to be able to have better success in interdicting fuel as it enters into the demonstration area. We are doing interdiction. There is no doubt. There were several charges yesterday, several seizures yesterday of gasoline. We also have the example where one of our members was swarmed during one of those interdictions, and ultimately we had to bring a public order team in to help protect the member, effect the arrest, and take the subject and our members out of that area. It is important that we have the right number of officers, right number of members present to be able to safely effect those arrests and safely do those interdictions. That's why we've asked for the numbers of officers we had to make sure that we can do the enforcement job that we know we need to do.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I do believe that Michelle Allen from CBC Kingston, you had your hand up earlier. So Michelle, if you have a question, we'll be going to you.
Hi, thank you. My question is, why haven't the police considered removing the protesters before removing the vehicles? If local companies won't help seize the vehicles and impound them, also couldn't you just go to the military, who have lots of heavy recovery vehicles and the means to defend their personnel, and bring them in?
Thank you for your question, Michelle. As we indicated early on in this, we're looking at all sorts of different options to safely, peacefully, and expeditiously end this occupation. have these demonstrators removed from our street, have them moved from our street so that we can get back to life as normal in Ottawa. We look at all sorts of options for removing the vehicles and having the people who are in that area either leave willingly or leave through intervention by our police services. All of those options still remain on the table, and we will continue to look at how we manage the situation and what we need to do at any point to peacefully end this.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Christy Kirkup from the Globe and Mail, followed by, followed by Tonda with the Toronto Star, and then we're going to be asking media to raise their hands because we will have time for some more questions. So Christy, do you have a question?
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. Downtown Ottawa residents have expressed they're very concerned about the images of the alleged arsonist starting a lobby fire at a condo building and then taping the doors shut. And I know that the police force has posted images of suspects. I'm just wondering if you can tell us about what police believed happened there. I appreciate you've said that there is an investigation underway and there's limitations on how much you can get into that. But is there any reason to believe there is a connection with the trucker protests, and have the suspects been identified?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Christy. As I reported yesterday, there was images that were captured of that as part of the initial complaint that we received. We have investigative teams who are assigned to that. Those images have been taken and shared widely through our networks across the country in order to look to identify the people involved in that very troubling, very terrible act. We absolutely understand the community's concern around something as dangerous as that, so we actively are investigating it. I don't have an update for you on that now, but what I can tell you is I do know that incidents like that are creating great amounts of community concern in the neighborhoods that are surrounding this demonstration. Although we don't have any direct linkage between the occupation, the demonstrators, and that act, the community is at a heightened risk because of those activities. We take that very, very seriously, and that's why you've seen our increased presence in a surge capacity and our increased enforcement in those neighborhoods to try and ensure that those residents have safety and security in their own neighborhoods, in the houses that they live. I know today a community meeting is occurring between the local ward councillor and members of that building, and the Ottawa Police are actually a part of that meeting as well. In ensuring that people feel safe where they live is ultimately absolutely important to the Ottawa Police Service, and we are taking all steps to make sure that feeling of safety and security comes back.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Tonda McCharles from the Toronto Star. Go ahead, Tonda, and ask your question. You are on mute.
Sorry about that. Now I'm back. Sorry.
You're good to go.
Thanks, Deputy Bell. I may have missed it, but I didn't, unless you already said how many of those extra 1,800 resources you've been actually given, if you've nailed that down. If you have already said that, I wonder if you could just clarify. But my question really goes to, we've already heard the federal government say that they are not prepared to talk to these convoy organizers. This afternoon, the public safety minister called them a small minority, very angry. It's no longer about truckers or vaccines. So given the federal government's position on that, I want to know, I haven't heard you say what the plan out of this is then. If they want to talk to the feds won't talk to them, and you're only in charge of logistics, you seem to be powerless to change anything.
Thank you very much for your question, Tonda. So I'll start with the numbers. We put an ask out for 1,800 officers, sworn and civilian members. We continue to work with our partners and with our planning teams to identify exactly where those officers are going to be coming from. We have had some from the beginning of this, we've had absolute cooperation with many of our partners. The RCMP and the OPP have provided resources to us to help support us. Police services across Ontario have actually identified resources to come and help work with us. That cooperation absolutely continues, and we thank all of our policing partners for their help and assistance through this. In terms of how we move forward, we continue to look at how we have fruitful dialogue and discussions with leaders within the occupation, within the demonstrators. We have strong police liaison team assets who are deployed on a daily basis and have ongoing and regular conversations with with the people who are leading this occupation. That is exceptionally important for us, that we continue to have those dialogues. As we move through, we will continue to look at all of the options we have. You've seen an increased enforcement presence from us. To date, we've had over 1,300 charges. We've had over 1,300 traffic violations identified. You've heard me lay out an overall investigative strategy to look at how we lay criminal charges, lay vehicle-related charges now and moving ahead. There is absolutely a need to end this. We are actively working to do it through peaceful, progressive negotiations, but we also have looked at enforcement angles to move us ahead.
Thank you. And before we move on to a possibility of a few more questions, I want to make sure that every media has been able to ask. So if you have not been able, you could raise your hand. And I do see Laura Osman. So we'll give you the mic and just identify what media you're with before you ask your question. It won't be long.
Hey there, Laura Osman, the Canadian Press. I wanted to ask you again about this 1,800 officers that you're looking for. You mentioned earlier that you sort of need more officers in order to sort of harden that perimeter. So a lot of people are wondering why the city doesn't file sort of more injunctions to get the vehicles out of there. But if they did, would you actually be able to enforce that with the officers that you have at this point, or is it a resource issue?
Thanks for the question, Laura. So the 1,800 officers are for a multitude of different activities. You've heard us talking about hardening the area around the demonstration and around the occupation. It takes upwards of 400 plus officers a day to manage that footprint that we currently have and actively look to shrink that footprint. Beyond that, we know that we need legal resources. We know we need investigative resources to look at the investigative strategy that we are looking to implement to create increased enforcement activities. We know that we need public order assets to be here to support us, as was evident yesterday as we began to do fuel interdiction as it went into the site of the occupation. It is going to take, and we've identified a number of resources to come in and support us to end this. We are absolutely committed to ending this, and that's why we've made the large ask we had, so that we can have the presence we need to successfully, expeditiously, and quickly end this occupation.
Thank you. And I've just been advised that DC Bell was actually gonna have to leave earlier. So we have time for 3 more questions. And okay, I just see that Guy Kenville, CBC. So we'll let Guy ask a question. Guy, you are good to go. Go ahead, Guy. Your mic should be unmuted. We should be able to hear you.
Hi, this is actually Shaoli Lee from City News. I'm sorry for I didn't realize. My question, I'll just get to it. My question concerns the staging areas being used by protesters. I understand that police have moved to dismantle the one at Confederation Park, but there's also a staging area on Coventry Road. I just want to know, does OPS know how many staging areas convoy protesters are currently using, and what's being done to discourage the establishment of further staging areas in suburbs like Vanier that could potentially essentially move some of the undesirable elements of these protests into other neighborhoods?
Thank you for your question. Right from the beginning of this, as we started to have discussions and bring planning around, we really strongly relied on gathering intelligence and information around the progress of the convoy across Canada. Ultimately, the initial weekend demonstration that led to the occupation we're currently seeing. We continue to work with partners between the OPP, the RCMP, the Sûreté de Québec, and the Gatineau Police to bring intelligence information in to identify things exactly like those fuel depots that we're seeing. We will continue to bring that information in, and as we learn about them and develop plans around them, we will actively shut them down because we know they are a major source of contribution to keeping the activities of the occupation going.
Thank you, and I apologize for the pronunciation of your name. We have time for one final question, and it'll be Ted Raymond with CTV Ottawa. Go ahead, Ted. I believe you did have a second question.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask Deputy Chief about the mood among the rank and file police force now. We've got a city basically questioning how you're doing your job. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what morale is like, and just as an aside to that, with bringing in these 1,800 additional resources, would that be a boost?
Thank you very much for asking that question, Ted. Our members are tired. They are very tired. They go out every single day down to our downtown core to try and take back a portion of our city that's been lost to this occupation. They work extremely hard in cold weather and extremely difficult conditions to manage this what is a demonstration and occupation, and they find it extremely challenging. The morale is challenged through this. There's no other way to put it. This is an extremely difficult job. They continue to work day in and day out. Some of our resources had to work 7 days straight, up to 18 hours a day, in order to keep the city safe. They've done an exceptional job, and I'm extremely proud of the work they're doing. Everything they do is here to help support safety and security in our community, and particularly to support the safety and security of the residents who are affected directly by this occupation. It has been a challenge for them. They continue to show up every single day and do amazing work. We asked for 1,800 officers, which is a big ask, because our members need that help and support in order to bring this to an end. I'm glad you asked about our officers, because this has been challenging for them, and I got to tell you, I'm proud of the work that they do every single day.
Thank you. And before we close, I'm going to offer Mr. Ayotte if he has any remarks that he would like to provide, and then that'll be the end of today's media availability. Mr. Ayotte?
Thank you for that. I just want everyone to know that the city is doing absolutely everything possible to help support the police in this, and we've had staff working very hard as well, and we're all very anxious to get this completed and over with. So please, know that we are working extremely hard to try and resolve this issue, and we're engaging all levels of government to try and do so. Thank you.
En français, M. Ayotte, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, certainement, Frédéric. Je voulais juste dire que la ville d'Ottawa travaille très fort avec la police pour essayer de régler et finir cette occupation. Nous travaillons avec les différents niveaux du gouvernement fédéral, provincial. Nous sommes certains que ça va finir, mais on demande un peu de patience. Je sais qu'il y a eu beaucoup de patience. On veut juste laisser le monde savoir qu'on travaille très fort pour essayer de terminer cette occupation.
Merci. Thank you. This concludes today's 30-minute question period. Alors, ceci conclut la période de questions de 30 minutes d'aujourd'hui. Thank you very much for joining us. Merci de vous être joints à nous.